Well, good morning, party people. How are we doing today? Good, good. I am so glad that you are here. My name's Katie. As Kurt and Selah said, we are continuing in our series today called No Place Like Home. And it is one of the joys of my life to just get to pastor this community. And it's another one of the joys of my life to get to see my kids growing up in a church like this, to get to see my daughter stand on a platform like this and share her story about how Jesus has changed her life and to get to use her spiritual gifts. There is nothing like the local church. So I hope you all are glad to be here too, because we are part of something really special. And so my emotion will pass, maybe. It'll probably come and go as we go on today, but I am just so thrilled that you all are here. And I know that word home, even just, I know for some of us it can be a complicated subject, while sometimes the thought of home can bring up just all the warm feelings of joy and acceptance and comfort. Many people are carrying around perhaps some of the deepest pain. Maybe there are some wounds around this idea of home, and for those that maybe should have been there for them to create that as their safest place. And we know in a room like this size that there are probably many different feelings attached to the word home. And while family and home relationships can at times be difficult, and oftentimes miss the intention and the heart of God, nevertheless, there is something still that is so central and so crucial about family. That God's desire for our human flourishing takes place in the form of a family. In all the ways that humanity, even throughout this book, there are tons of examples of the ways that families got it wrong throughout the story of God and his people. But we also see the heart of God as revealed sometimes as Father, other times as Mother. We see Jesus, God in human form. Jesus himself was raised in a family, right, by imperfect human parents. And that while Jesus himself was never married and never had children of his own, we also saw Jesus raise up into maturity this kind of ragtag group of his fearless followers who got it wrong sometimes, right? It was this chosen family of people who Jesus poured into like any loving parent would. He coached them. He corrected them at times. He encouraged them. He nurtured their faith. He nurtured their journey. And was their friend in every sense of the word. Right, and so each and every one of us, it's undeniable, good, bad, the ugly, right? Everything in between, every single one of us has been deeply and profoundly shaped by our family. Right, maybe there's parts of our story we wish we could kind of wipe that slate clean. Maybe there's other parts that we are so deeply grateful it's hard to find words for. I definitely feel like, man, I am just so grateful for the foundation of love and care and support that I got from my family and my mom sitting right here. And that has just been such a gift in the way she still pours into my kids, her grandkids. It has just been such a blessing. But throughout this series, if you've been here for any of the other 3 weeks, right, this is week 4, we've talked about family of origin. We've looked at the communities that have shaped us, whether that's in the local church, other spaces, right? And today we're talking about parenting, which is a holy and high calling like no other. I sometimes struggle to even find words for it. And even if you are not in a season of life right now where you are raising kids in your home, whether you're longing to one day be a parent, whether that's not part of your life plan whatsoever, wherever you find yourself today, maybe you're an auntie or an uncle, maybe you have kids that are in your life in some way, shape, or form, or young people that look up to you as a mentor at work. In some way, shape, or form, every single one of us, as a church community as well, are part of this call that we have as the local church to invest in, to pour into, to help shape the next generation. And so even if you feel like, oh, I don't have kids, this message doesn't really apply to me, I can just hit snooze, I hope you don't, because I hope every single one of us will find our place and find some space of significance from these feeble words that I have come in here today with. So This is why we've titled this message, Future Legends in the Making. It even made it onto our little Restoration-isms shirt. All the Restoration Kids shirts have this phrase, but the truth is that future legends are in the making when we are pouring into the young people of our church. Right. In fact, even as we were kind of putting together some of the final preparation of this series, No Place Like Home, that word home kind of hit us a little bit this last, throughout the month of July. We were without a home. We just moved about a month ago, but this summer looked a little bit unpredictable for us as we had a pipe burst in our one of the upstairs bathrooms of our rental home we were living in and flooded half the house. So we had to move out really quick and trust God to help us land and find our new place. And so while we were kind of upheaved, our whole life was kind of out of sorts as we were jumping from Airbnbs to hotels to, luckily my mom lives close by, so we had some time of just trusting God that while we were in this thing, choosing to believe this isn't happening to us, this is happening for us. And even in the midst of a pretty rocky summer that, to be honest, we're still kind of bouncing back from, God opened up some doors to some pretty incredible conversations around home, around purpose for us and for our kids. And one night specifically, we were sitting around the table at my mom's house, and the kids were all excited to have a lemonade stand later that week with my mom. She was going to be watching them while we got away for some work things. They threw a lemonade stand. Yes, there's a picture. That's Selah, Isaiah, and Leighton on the end, our 3 kiddos. And as we were kind of preparing for this lemonade stand, and we got into a really beautiful conversation around refugees and a organization that we've partnered with before as a church called Love Does. And they just opened up a refugee camp down in Tijuana. And as we were talking about this with our kids, about our houseless neighbors and what it must be like for some of those people who'd left everything in their home country to come and try and start over, our kids were just flooded with a level of empathy and compassion that had this thing not happened and uprooted us from our home, I don't think they would have been able to enter into a conversation like that where pretty much every single one of us were in tears by the end, and we were just researching and getting to know this organization a little bit more. So I say that all to say is that don't be surprised if you see a pop-up lemonade stand happening outside of the church in the next couple of weeks, because they are plotting and they are planning to make a trip as a family down to Tijuana that they want to go and help, and they want to bring all of their lemonade stand earnings to donate and to give towards this cause that has kind of captured their heart over this last summer. And I share this with you not to humble brag on my own kids, although everything in me wants to do that at any given point in life ever. But here's the thing, is I really kind of deflect a lot of that praise and a lot of that beauty back to this community. I love that our kids love God, and I love that our kids love this church. It's been one of our most consistent prayers as a couple, that God would continue to surround our kids with people who love God and who are following Jesus in a way that sweeps them up in all of that goodness. And it's not always easy as pastors' kids, right? If you ever have an impulse to pray for us and our kids, please do. But pastors' kids don't always have it the easiest, right? They arrive here early. They oftentimes stay late. Sometimes during the week after school, they're here helping us get stuff done. There's ways that they serve behind the scenes that most of you may never see. And they were also kind of born into this family calling of sorts, right? They didn't have a choice, and yet with all the heartbreak that comes with this work and with all of the beauty that comes with this work, I love that our kids see the church as something that they want to be a part of. I love that our kids get it. Not all the time, they're not perfect. They definitely fail, and the beauty and grace and forgiveness of this community is also there for them. But I wanted to, at the front of this message, honor our kids as well, because they are pretty incredible humans. And Before you go writing the story too deep into that our home is just sunshine and kumbaya all the time, let me just set the record straight. It is not. It's messy. It's messy work raising kids. Any parents in the room who have kids of various ages or even adult children or maybe grandchildren, it is messy work. It is the hardest but best job ever. And I regularly ask myself, right, even though I teach on this topic often, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, I often, as a mom in the unseen spaces of life, find myself asking the question, why do I lose my cool with my kids so easily, right? Any parents in the room, have you ever felt that? You're like, I love you so much. How did I just go from like, you're amazing, to like, really, right? We can go from like 0 to 100 in like a snap. So I'm glad I'm not alone. Thank you all for your vulnerability there. And here's the reason why we can lose our cool with our kids so easily. It's because we care about them so much. It's because we see who they're becoming more than anyone else. We've seen who they've been, where they've come from, all the hope we have for their future. And also because parenting and or, investing meaningfully into the next generation as a surrogate parent or as a leader in this community, right? There's this constant push-pull to be both deeply aware of the present, right? If you're a parent, you know this. Like, you have to be present to what is it they need. Also, emotionally, what story do they want to tell you right now? And if you're scrolling your phone, you will hear it from them, right? They will call you out, and they won't pull any punches, right? That there's this simultaneous push to be deeply aware of the present while also deeply connected to the past, right, parents? Anyone in the room who's seen a kid, whether it's your niece or nephew or your own child, or your own grandchild, right? You see who they were, right? You see how they've grown, right? Maybe you've even marveled at how they've grown or how they used to need you for certain things. And then maybe we've even shed some tears around the fact that now they don't need me for those things anymore. So we have the present, we have the past, we also have the future, right? And all three of these things are colliding simultaneously, right? We're deeply aware of the future, that who they're becoming, that it's our job to help prepare them for what they've yet to navigate in this life, right? So while all three of those, past, present, future, are all colliding at once, we also get a bonus one, is that the older they get, the less control you have as a parent, the less information you have about what they're doing at any given time, right? And we're also having to deal with, how do I also deal with that, right? Rude. God, what a terrible plan. Why would you? It's hard work. But I love that Richard Rohr, who is an author, pastor, faith leader, says it this way. He says, I would wonder if you could be a hero or heroine if you did not live in deep time. That is, the past, the present, and the future, all at once. And when I think about this holy and high calling of raising future legends, right, or living in this heroic life, it doesn't necessarily mean masked superheroes swooping in to save the day. The heroic life is any kind of life where you are loving in such a way that you are investing outside of yourself in a way that makes you lose control at times, in a way that makes you feel vulnerable at the amount of love you are pouring out for the sake of others. And that could be in your own home, that could be in this community, that can be in any space where you feel that sense of calling to love, to keep showing up, to keep investing when it doesn't make sense and you'd rather sleep in. Friends, that is the kind of heroic life that we are talking about, right? And Father Richard Rohr, he wrote a fascinating book called Falling Upward, where he discusses the reality, and this is just to kind of go into a little bit of human development, to kind of give us a broad arc of the human journey, right? Where he's discussing the reality that there are kind of really two halves of life. And he was referring to the first part of his book, referring to the first half of life, where it's childhood and adolescence and adulthood into our early adulthood, where a person is building the container, so to speak, talking about their life, right? Where in the first half of life, someone's asking questions kind of like this: who will I become? What do I believe or not believe about God? How will I live out my faith journey in an authentic way? What will I do with my life? Job, house, where will I live, right? Who will I go through my life with, whether I marry or not, right? What kind of home will I create? How will I get through this life? And then oftentimes in the first half of life, sometimes even the process of beginning to start a family, right? Whether that's biologically, whether that's chosen family in your own home or outside of a meaningful community, right? Even single people can build meaningful community and invest beautifully in this kind of calling, right? This isn't just the nuclear family, right? Family, it takes on many shapes and many forms, right? So this first half of life is all about creating community, meaningful connections, pushing beyond this very human question, right? Right when you're starting to kind of get to the end of the first half of life, pushing into the second half of life, it's this wondering of, is this all there is to my life? How human of a question is that? In the midst of asking this question lies the ability to embrace this hero's mindset of, what is this all for? If this is just about me making money, paying bills, earning approval, having nice things, a fancy car, just building the outer shell, right? What is it all for, right? So maybe some of you kind of feel yourself, whether that's midlife. Some people start kind of getting into the second half of life earlier. Some people might be well into their old age, but never fully kind of cross over to this second half of life. And this book, if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. But as Rohr talks about the second half of life, oftentimes at around midlife, the later adult years, you're pressing into a deeper questioning than just the typical midlife crisis, right? But this is a space where you're getting to some of the deeper spiritual work, where you're not just building the container of your life. Where will I go? Where will I live? Who will I spend it with? What will I do for work, right? Where you're starting to now fill the container. The container's been built in the first half. The second half is about, what am I filling my container with? You're asking new questions. You're forming a deeper soul framework. How will I give myself to something that will outlive me? Is a powerful question that in the second half of life one might start to ask. How will I leverage my life for the sake of others? What values am I shaping in my children and grandchildren as they age and begin to launch out of the nest into the real world? Maybe spiritually there's a new longing stirring of, what new depth and intimacy can I experience in my relationship with God? Right? Can I rest in simply being a soul in God's presence? Can I experience that kind of freedom without all the attachments to having to earn approval, gain, accumulate more and more wealth and things, right? You're free to simply just rest in the presence of God. And this, friends, is where deep time in this second half of life, as well as this hero's mindset, where we're looking at life as, how can I give my life away? How can I tap into that deep time where I can see the next generation that needs me to invest now in a way that benefits them in the future, right? It's a deep work of cultivating the kind of rhythms with God consistently or daily even, right? And how we do this in the context of family is a consistent theme throughout the entirety of the scriptures, right? We see this maturity, this depth come, and we see Jesus contending with some of this. And so as we prepare today, I just want to give a bit of a backdrop into some of the beliefs that shaped Jesus' cultural upbringing from his ancient Jewish roots. And so Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9, this is a repetitive thing that people would say, that the ancient Israelites would say, and it's called the Shema. Let's all say that together. It's kind of fun to say. 1, 2, 3. Ready? Shema. Shema. The Shema was kind of an anchoring central truth to God's people. In verse 4, it says this, "Listen, O Israel." Here it is. "The Lord is our God. The Lord is one," or alone in some translations. It's referring to the identity of God, as God is three in one, but God is God. It's basically what they're saying. God is the only God, right? The Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Okay? That's the Shema. You probably have heard that because Jesus later repeats the Shema as the greatest commandment. That's how later in the New Testament it's rephrased as, what's the greatest commandment, when he was asked that. And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus kind of adds this others piece to it. So that came from the Shema. Jesus would have been taught this like breathing. From an early age, probably before he talked, this would have been imprinted on his mind, on his memory. And then Deuteronomy goes on to say this in verse 6, because hear how they not only took this as something to memorize and to repeat mindlessly, but it was worked into the fabric. It was applied into every aspect of their being and lifestyle. Verse 6 goes on to say, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Right? You see the multi-generational passing down the baton of faith here. Commit yourselves to these wholeheartedly, these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you're on the road, right? Going on family vacation, when you are going to bed, and when you're getting up, right? There were certain prayer times throughout the day they would pray these prayers. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. I don't know about forehead, but maybe it was like a headdress or bracelets, right? To wear it as jewelry on your body. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. They wanted to reinforce this truth about who God was into every aspect of their lives, right? And it was this beautiful reminder that I think has gotten passed down throughout the generations of God's people, and that's this big idea that we're contending with today, is that we want to invest now with later in mind, right? Invest now with later in mind. That here's this big truth. So we're going to start pouring it out into our kids from a young age so that all throughout their life they'll be reminded of this truth. And now, yes, as you sat down, you probably noticed the candy on your seat is Now and Later's. And since we were talking about kids today, this was one of my favorite childhood candies. Shout out to any 90s kids in the rooms. You're like, when was the last time you saw Now and Later? These are one of my favorites. Apologies if anyone got banana. You can trade with a partner if you want. But Now and Later's, you can, and yes, you can eat one, but save just one for the end, okay? It'll make sense why later. But yeah, just to reinforce this big idea, right? I don't want us to forget about this, so I was willing to bribe you with sugar into remembering it, locking it into your mind. To invest now with later in mind. What do I mean by that? That parenting, raising up the next generation in a communal sense, right? All of that. If we are investing now, present, to the present reality of what our students, our kids, and our youth are facing, knowing that down the road, right, we're all adults, most of us in the room are adults, so we have the wisdom of age and experience. We know what is coming for them along these various stages of development. Some of us in this room are in our second half of life, and so we're looking at, or we ought to be looking at, how am I going to pour my life out for the sake of others, for those coming up behind me? How can I be mentoring someone? How can I be instilling these values into my own kids, right? Parenting with the end in mind. Planning our ministry strategies with the end in mind, right? Investing now so that later, right? Now and later. Get it? See what I did? All right. So I hope we can lock all of that in. And here's the things that the truth is, depending on what age your kids are, I know my kids were kind of entering into the tween era, the tween energy. And there are certain things that we should give our kids tons of voice and choice over, especially as they get older and becomes developmentally appropriate for them to have a voice and choice in the kind of style of clothes they want to wear, what kind of activities they want to do, what their friends, who they want to hang out with. And then if you're a wise parent or adult in the room, you probably know that there are some other things that they still need us clearly to lead them on, right? Brushing their teeth, getting proper sleep, eating healthy food, hydrating, drinking enough water throughout the day, treating others with respect and kindness, the spiritual habits like coming to church, spending time with God at home, right? Parents, there's a balance, right? There is a balance that we need to find with this, because I get that tension too as a mom, right? We don't want our kids to have that story one day where they're telling their story around or at a therapist's office or around a college group or something where they're like, I was always forced to go to church, right? Or I was forced to spend time with God, right? Any good parent probably doesn't want that to be part of their story, especially if that was part of your own story, right? So parents, there is a balance to find this with this, because I get the tension, right? We don't want them to have that story, but the truth is, just like many of the other healthy habits that we have to lead and direct our kids to do, like brush their teeth, brush their hair, we have to lead them because we are the ones that have the wisdom. We know what is best for them long term, right? And if we believe that the teachings of Jesus are what we want to shape their life, and it's a core value of our family, then we can't just sprinkle it on wherever it fits our schedule and show up when all the stars align and expect for this deeply rooted faith foundation to be formed whenever the weekend's free or whatever, right? It must be a priority that we build our lives around, similar to that Deuteronomy verse, right? And here's where it takes some creativity, right? Because like I said, we're getting into the tween zone. We're having mood swings and some of that stuff happening in our life. And here's where oftentimes creativity comes into play, to weave it into our everyday, ordinary life. That part of how we live our lives as followers of Jesus is not just on Sunday, but if conversations around God are peppered throughout our week, then coming to church on Sunday starts to just feel a little bit more normal. That a hunger for God might start to come online where your kid no longer pushes back, right? Maybe there's a time they need to sleep in here and there. Yes, for sure. But how do we get our kids to actually want to show up, right? I love that my kids love showing up. And the times when they don't, I let them just come sit with me. Or once in a while, if they want to sleep in and stay at grandma's, that's cool too. When they see that we can serve together, when we can worship together, when they're included, where their faith environment and their community is actually fun, right? We want to prioritize our kids having an amazing experience when they're here, right? So less of this feeling of like forced or coercion, but more time spent creating moments of awe and wonder when it comes to God. And that, friends, is true spiritual leadership, right? When it comes to these beliefs that would have shaped Jesus' cultural upbringing, Proverbs 22:6 says this. It says, direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. And here's what this verse actually means. It means give your children the tools to authentically navigate the big questions of faith. Show them grace along the way. Normalize forgiveness in the process of growth, because they're not going to get it right. Your child is not perfect. You as a parent are not perfect. I know, rocket science. That's if you needed to come to church just for that tidbit of truth alone, right? No one is expecting our kids to be perfect all the time. We are going to need the daily grace and forgiveness of God, especially in a community where there's more people in the mix, right? So this right path, I'll define that as simply that we are modeling for them what it looks like to love and follow Jesus. Not perfectly, but honestly, including our own mistakes as parents along the way. That the right path will still be filled with challenges and good days, right? If you've been following God for a while, you realize that deciding to follow Jesus doesn't just poof make your life perfect. In fact, you're just a little bit more aware of your needs for growth. You're just a little bit more aware that things are hard, right? So being on the right path will still have failure and success. The right path will still have questions and doubts and new discoveries. The right path will still have grief and haters and bullies and rejection and other people's conflicting opinions, as well as all of the joy and beauty of deep, profound friendship that will carry us as a community and hopefully our kids through life. So when we talk about this living out, the staying on the right path, this will require years, decades even maybe, of good and loving leadership from parents. right? Staying on the right path. Maybe you've heard it interpreted in a weird way before, but this is not talking about a set of religious rules and beliefs that if they stray from these beliefs and rules, they're just out, they're off the path, right? No, this is talking, maybe you've heard it that way, or maybe you've just assumed that that's what it meant by reading it in English outside of some of the cultural, historical context, right? What this means is that the right path is simply a way, following the way of Jesus, trusting the grace and goodness of God along the way. So if that kind of sets us up with a little bit of the understanding of kind of what Jesus' background, what his faith family might have looked like, I want to spend a little bit of time for us actually looking at the actual family that shaped Jesus. Right, so we're going to be looking at page 615. We're going to be in Luke 2, chapter 2, verses 41 through 52. And this is a beautiful expose that Luke gives us. Luke was a researcher. He was a physician. Luke was commissioned to do some eyewitness reporting. So he gathered facts. He did interviews, and we have to presume that he probably talked to Jesus' mom quite a bit in his old age, because Luke actually gives the most about Jesus' childhood, right? We have the Christmas story in Luke 2. Christmas is coming in a few months. We'll read a lot of that. But this is a story about Jesus' tween era. So I felt, as a parent, very seen. So as you find it, that's a little bit of context, and it's right at the bottom left corner of page 615. And so what was happening is the people were all kind of making a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. They were all traveling by foot in kind of a big caravan. So they would walk all day, they would camp out, they would make it to Jerusalem, they would be there for all of the festivities, and then they would head back home. And so verse 41 picks up from there. We can follow along. It'll also be up on the screen. It says this, that every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. And when Jesus was 12 years old, they attended the festival as usual. And after the celebration was over, they started home to Nazareth. But Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents didn't miss him at first. What? Hold up. Keep reading. Because they assumed that he was among the other travelers. But when he didn't show up that evening, they started looking for him among their relatives and friends. Now, I get it. I have an 11-year-old. We're starting to extend the leash a little bit, give her a little bit more freedom. This seems a bit extreme, though, right? To go an entire day and to not see your kid, right? 3 days. I've had that 30-second panic at Target before that felt like, when my kids were younger and they would wander off, and you're like, how did 30 seconds just take a year off of my life? And it just felt like 3 days that they were missing wandering around, right? Mom panic brain mode. So poor Mary and Joseph, right? They must have been besides themselves in this realization that Jesus was no longer with them. So pick up in verse 45. It says, when they couldn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to search for him there. 3 days later, they finally discovered him in the temple, sitting among the religious leaders, listening to them and asking questions. Right? And all who heard him, all who heard the depth of his questions, right? They were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So you have so many questions and curiosities about this story. Like, what's with these religious teachers that for 3 days had just this child alone with them and never thought to ask, do you have parents? Where are you from? Right? They were just in their theological teacher mode. Wow, really? But isn't it kind of endearing, right, to pause and to just let this sink in, of this 12-year-old Jesus as a kid, so hungry to learn more about God, asking questions in all of his 12-year-old glory. I love that Luke preserved this story for us to have a glimpse into the life of Jesus as a tween. All right, next scene. Here we go. Verse 48. His parents didn't know what to think. Enter mom, right? This is your Home Alone, Kevin moment, right? Son, his mother said to him, Why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been frantic, searching for you everywhere. Like, you can hear it in her voice. You don't even have to hear it, right? Imagine the feelings pulsing through Mary's mind and heart in that moment, right? Relief that he's found, right? Anger at Jesus for not communicating with them. This was like pre-Apple Watch era. Maybe Mary felt some level of mom guilt or mom shame, that she's like, oh my gosh, how did I not find him sooner, right? Also just confusion. I mean, my kids ask for a snack every 10 minutes, I feel like. How did you go an entire day without noticing that he was gone, right? It says kind of a lot about their group of traveling companions. This must have been a very high trust community, right? If she could assume that she could just leave her kids in the care of others, right? And then we see that there was some confusion, some franticness. We've been searching for you everywhere. Confusion about why he stayed behind. I'm curious, right, for Jesus. Here's his response in verse 49. But why did you need to search? I don't know if he was being snarky. It was Jesus, so there's probably some respect baked into his response. It's like, why did you need to search? Right? Assuming gosh, Mom, you should be able to read my mind by now, 12 years. He's like, didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? But they didn't understand what he meant, right? And let's let that sink in for a second, right? Jesus, God in a bod, still needed a human community of people where he could work out his spiritual growth with the Father. Jesus could have gone off by himself and just prayed with God alone, but isn't it interesting that he goes to the temple, that he's asking these questions, that he's wrestling out his faith with other leaders, and they're astounded, right? Part of what prepared Jesus for his ministry that was ahead of him, right? Talk about deep time. Imagine what it would be like to be his mom and to know, I had this angelic encounter. I know exactly who my son's going to be. I also have some hints into what the future might get a little dicey down the road. But here we are in the middle of deep time, right? And he seeks out faith leaders, other people to wrestle it out and do the growth of spiritual maturity with the context of community, right? And then in verse 51, it says this, and then, right after all that was said and done, he returned to Nazareth with them, and he was obedient to them, his parents. And his mother stored up all of these things in her heart. Yeah, talk about a moment you'd never forget, looking for your son for 3 days, right? Of course, she stored this in her heart. She pondered these things. We see this throughout other places where Mary would practice pondering these things in her heart. And then in verse 52, it says, and Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and all the people. You see, this passage is central to our ministry strategy, actually. If I'm to get out of pastoral brain a little bit into more strategic mindset, this is central to our ministry strategy for Restoration kids and Restoration students, because this verse, Luke 2:52, is something we reference every time we do a family dedication, because there is something that is so key to the growth and development of a child when there is a partnership between parents and the church, right? We see this in the way Jesus grew up in a community. Jesus grew not just physically, right? Even as a tween, in the peak of hormones and voice cracking, right? He grew in favor with God and people. All people. Different personalities, preferences, different communication styles, right? Jesus didn't just grow physically and memorize a bunch of Bible facts with these leaders, with his community, right? He learned how to get along with people. He learned how to grow. He learned how to form community. He learned how to serve and also be poured into, right? He learned the unforced rhythms of grace as well as discipline, fun as well as formation. And in case you're wondering where I'm going with this, my kids, your kids, also need this kind of community too, right? In order to grow into the fullness of whatever God has for them, whatever God calls them to in their lives ahead of them. And let me be honest as a parent, right? This kind of partnership, right? Where there's a local church, a community, as well as all of what we're trying to instill in our kids at home. Like, as a parent, I need this too. Don't you? I need a community. I need to know that there are other people in that room right now that Leslie is teaching my middle schooler and reinforcing the same things that I'm teaching her at home. That right now, Will and Nora are teaching our kids in Restoration Kids, that Amanda and Sarah are teaching our preschoolers, that there are people who are partnering with you right now, parents, teaching, pouring into, loving your kids towards Jesus. I need that. I want more of that. I can't do this faith life without a team. So our kids need that. We need that. And there's a lot that they can learn from youth sports. I get it. We do competitive dance and Little League and flag football and music. Like we do all the things. My kids have lots of interests. And there's a lot of things that our kids can learn from youth sports and scouts and all of the amazing activities that we love to fill our schedules with. But friends, there is nothing more worthy of an investment of your time, investment of your energy, and investment of your resources than to pour into a community that will give your kids the faith foundation that they will need for a lifetime of following Jesus. There is no more worthy investment. And so as a church, I want us to land on this big idea together that we are not raising children. We are raising the future world changers. We are not just raising children that mind their manners, that dot their I's, that cross their T's. We're raising future world changers who will one day live out a bold faith adventure, who might lead corporations, that might lead social movements, that might lead nonprofits, that might be secretaries, that might be business people, that might be artists, creatives, that they're going to be all out in this world changing the world, doing good things. And so let's pour into them now so that they know that they're prepared for everything that the world is going to throw at them as they get out into adulthood. Philippians 4:9 says this, "Keep putting into practice all that you have learned and received from me, everything that you have heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you." Friends, this is a mighty promise the Apostle Paul gives to the followers in Philippi. He's saying the gift and the goal is God's presence, right? So keep putting into practice all of the things that I have taught you, right? This is a mentor speaking into the lives of followers, that it's not a matter of if, it's that life will happen. Hard things will happen, right? But God's peace will be with you, and that's the promise. And the truth is, when it comes to parenting, see, parents, God chose you to model his heart to your child. And what if it's as simple as parents is simply just putting our children on a path and watching them fall in love with Jesus? It's easier said than done. But as you kind of take your now and laters home with you, and you can eat your last one now if you've kind of been like saving that last one. I know I would totally have eaten these right now if I didn't have to talk, but as you have those now and laters, right? As we kind of let this big idea sink in, that we can invest now with later in mind. That we can both have the end in mind of all that we hope and pray and desire for our kids to become as they grow, and simultaneously invest in them that way now. Here's a couple of ways that this might look. Parents, to speak to you for a little bit, prioritize consistency here in this community. A true partnership requires consistency, right? Your leadership is required in your home. I hope and pray that we don't wait until our kids, I see this a lot of times. I've been in ministry for now over like 20 years. I see a lot of times parents get to like the teen years where their kids are like off track and, making crazy choices, and they're like, we got to go to church, my kid's out of control, right? And at that point, not that it's too late, nothing's impossible for God. Like, there's all kinds of incredible stories of God coming in and helping a kid find freedom, right? But wouldn't it be so much wiser to just build that circle of influence into your kids' life now to shape and help point them to Jesus so that maybe they will be that friend that is there for the friend making poor decisions when they become a teenager? So maybe they can be the influencers on their campus? Maybe. I think it's worth an ask. Some encouragement to those of you who are leaders of Restoration kids and Restoration students. Some of you in here, I'm going to do it. Sorry. Will you stand if you are a student or a kids leader in Restoration Kids in any of the age groups? Real quick. Yes. Thank you. I believe in giving honor where honor is due. But thank you. We know it takes extra time and energy and love to pour into from cradle to college on everything in between. Thank you for the way that you pour into the kids and families of this church. Stay the course. Keep honing your skills. Intentional impact takes time. And trust that God is using you in whatever ministry space you're in. Trust that God is using you even on the days that it doesn't feel like He is. He is. And then lastly, to our faith family, that includes everyone in here, even if it's your first time here. I just want to encourage you maybe to consider serving, consider inviting a friend. Maybe you know a young person who their family could use a little bit of hope. They could use a sense of radical belonging. Maybe there's someone you can invite or invest in outside of this church community with the hope of how God might impact them through you simply sharing your story. Right? Maybe there's a way you can contribute in some way, whether that's financially or through prayer. There's tons of ways that you can grow in the process of contributing and pouring out for others. And for those of you that maybe want like kind of a 201 or like an extra credit kind of challenge, I put together a little resource a few years ago and did a workshop on how to create a family mission statement. This is some work that we had actually done before we actually had kids, and then we did it again once we had kids. We have a few copies of this over by the prayer area, over by the cross, and you can also scan that QR code if this is something that you're like, you know what? If corporations and sports teams and organizations and churches, if they get their heads together to talk about what are our core values and what's a mission, like what is the direction that we want to go, why haven't I thought to really put some of that thought down on paper for our family or for our marriage? If that is work that you would like to do, but maybe you can use a little bit of support, scan that QR code. If you could also go solo. You can fly solo, go at it alone, but if you'd like a little bit of support, I'd love some feedback on if going through that either like in an online kind of a Zoom workshop or in person and various times and availability. So if that's you and you would be interested in an opportunity like that, please send me some feedback and we can put together an opportunity to go a little bit deeper into this work, because I truly, truly believe that crafting intention that is just as spiritual, to put together a plan, to put together words, and to trust what God can do through that discernment work. So head back. You can grab that at the prayer area. And as we wrap up, I just want you to know that we're praying for you, that our team will also be there if you need prayer, whether it's parenting or whatever season you find yourself in, or maybe there's something totally separate from this message that you would just like some hope or the name of Jesus prayed into. Pastor Kurt and I will be back there, and we would love to pray for you. But in the meantime, as we prepare to worship, I just want to invite you to stand if you're able, and we will pray together. God, I thank you so much that you are a God that invests in us, that you see the full arc of our lives, that not a single day of our lives is unknown to you. And that, God, I also thank you that you are willing to go to such great lengths to be with us. That, Jesus, as you walked on this earth, you modeled towards your busy disciples who are shooing children away. Jesus, you invited them close so that you could bless them. That there is something about your heart that is so unexpectedly geared towards the young ones, the vulnerable ones, the unseen, marginalized. So God, as we just acknowledge in this now moment that every single one of us is your child, that you have the perfect love of a heavenly father or a heavenly mother. As we see revealed through your scriptures, that God, you love us as your children. You call us your own. You say that we belong in your presence. What a gift that is, God. We say hallelujah to that. That is an incredible, incredible gift. So Jesus, as we sing to you, Father, as we worship your holy name today, God, would you help cultivate in us that same kind of heart that you have for us as your children, that we would pour that heart out to our own children, to the children of this church, to the next generation, that they would rise up, that they would grow up being changed by the radical belonging of your love and what that means for their lives, God. I pray for revival among the next generation of our youth, of our kids, of our own hearts, God. I pray for every parent who maybe feels weary in the season that they're in, that they would know that you are with them, that you see them, that you love them, that they would know they're not alone. So we worship you, God. We sing to you. We pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Let's sing, friends.